Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, brought to you by Music Ally, the show that both looks at the finances of the music industry while also bringing you stories and comment from the pop business in the past week. He's Stuart Dredge, I'm Steve Lamack. If you want a guide to what's going on in the music industry and how it all works, then here we are every week. Let's start with a financial fact which caught our eye this week. I mean, we sort of get numb to this because we so often see eye-watering financial figures in the music business, which will, without a shadow of a doubt, make you sit up and go, how much? But here's one which is a definite sign of the times. What's your big number this week, Stuart?
My big number is $5 billion, coming in strong.
$5 billion relates to what?
This is how much, controversial, I should say, AI music firm Suno could be worth. And this is based on it's raising a funding round at the moment. And when you raise the amount of money, the investors value a company, how much it's worth. And they reckon it could be worth $5 billion, which is double its valuation just 6 months ago. So the last time it raised money, it was worth $2.45 billion. Now it's worth supposedly $5.
I mean, this reminds me sort of the growth of Spotify in the early days as it went and found more money to fuel more expansion. It seems to be sort of along similar lines, I guess, this appetite to grow.
Yeah, and it's kind of this is based on a Billboard report. So they had some, and they were reporting on what it's going to spend the money on. So they haven't said how much it's raising, but it's probably hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And they reckon apparently 15% of that has been earmarked to be spent on, and I'll do quote marks, data, which is the cuddly phrase used to refer to the actual music that Suno trains its model on. So that means, and like actually producer Joe crunched these numbers while I was away last week. And if they raise $250 million again, like their last funding round, that could mean around $37.5 million to be spent on data, i.e. licensing deals with music labels.
Right.
So I guess that's the thing. Like when they raise money, that increases the prospect of them being able to dangle more cash in front of the record labels who are still suing them to make those lawsuits go away and and get licensed. So that could be when they close this round, which hasn't happened yet. That could be the next thing that happens. They sign a couple of deals because they'll have the money to kind of throw at people.
Right. Okay, 3 other talking points from the past week. Here's an interesting one, because we cover the world of live music a lot on this podcast and the workings of the live industry. In fact, there's 2 or 3 live music-related topics this week, but this one in particular I think is worth discussing. And this actually prompted by a piece that our very own Captain Joe Sparrow wrote for Music Ally last week, which is about blue dot fever. Explain blue dot fever.
It sounds rum, doesn't it? Well, it's when you're booking seats in a venue, so like a big venue that's got seats rather than all selling. I think, and this is Ticketmaster, I think, is it? The grey dots, the seats have been sold, so you can't get those. The blue dots are the ones still available. So if you're an artist and you've got a stadium gig and there are a lot of blue dots on Ticketmaster seating, that's bad news. Lots of empty seats, and it's now been coined as this phrase, blue dot fever, to cover basically a whole bunch of big tours that have been cancelled or delayed or scaled down. They rarely say we aren't selling any tickets, so we're cancelling. Yeah, there's a whole multiplicity of reasons that are given: spend time with family, get the show right, work on new material. But these seating plans are public, so people can see. And the thing, and I don't want to pick on one group in particular, but one of the big spurs for this tour were the Pussycat Dolls.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know, they reformed recently. Well, 3 of them did. And this big comeback tour was announced. And I think Sky News ran down the figures. And apparently the opening night was an 11,000 capacity arena, and they'd sold 4,000 seats.
Right.
To plan for that. There was another one that was 20,000 venue. They'd sold 1,500 tickets. So this was an example. And then the tour was called off, and the statement came out, didn't really try and avoid it. They were saying, we've got to cancel this. But there have been a bunch of different ones. And some of the artists in these stories are like Zayn Malik from One Direction, Meghan Trainor, Jennifer Lopez, Post Malone, Jelly Roll. They've all cancelled tours or dates recently, even if the reasons weren't necessarily the ticket sales weren't given that, but people could see that they weren't selling well.
Right. What's it? I don't know what's at the root of this, because I guess it could be all manner of reasons why this is happening. Are we saying this is happening more than usual? The fact that actually there are maybe too many tours out there, or the tickets are too expensive at this particular point? I mean, also, when you talk about somebody like Zayn Malik, is there just, certain genres, is there just saturation in the market? And if you paid out for Harry Styles, you haven't got any money left for Zayn Malik or something like that.
And Niall Horan's often tour as well, so they were there.
Yeah.
I mean,
or is it as we've as we've pondered on this show in the past, are promoters getting just a bit too bold in their venue choices? Are artists miscalculating how many tickets they are worth, and therefore they're booking venues that are just too big for them?
Well, I think that's it. I mean, so some of these concerts have been comeback tours. So, for example, Pussycat Dolls, Jennifer Lopez, where I guess they must be the hardest to gauge, aren't they? If someone has been off for a while and come back. But I think you're right. The competition. I mean, like as this was all happening, I got a press release about Olivia Rodrigo announcing a load more big gigs and selling out the ones she had already. BTS are selling out stadiums around the world. So, I think this is it. There are some big shows that are selling out really quickly and are expensive. And then if you're up against them and you've kind of slightly misjudged it, and I think maybe what's happening is, so it's maybe happening a bit more, but I think what's also happening is the decision to cancel is also being bolder. Like I think it's becoming really, really quickly obvious this tour is going to struggle. And maybe some of the other things we talk about, the cost of touring, everything that goes into it, mean that if you see it's going to be a disaster or underwhelming, maybe it is better to cancel early than to try and press on and hope people will buy tickets in the run up to it. So I think maybe that's one thing that's changed. Like people are making a decision to cancel more quickly and more firmly, rather than saying, well, ticket sales will pick up closer to the actual dates, won't they?
Yeah. I mean, this is just a much, much larger version of what we've been talking about buying tickets early, because obviously this is happening at grassroots level, where promoters are on very tiny margins. But then again, at this point, when you're at stadium, arena level, then there's a lot of money involved that you stand to lose. And that, going back to the cost thing, with somebody like Pussycat Dolls, you wonder how much the artists themselves have asked for, which will then dictate how many tickets you need to sell and what cost those tickets are going to be for the promoter and everyone. So for the promoter to be able to pay the artist and make their own money back, it's quite high risk, I guess, which is why maybe they are pulling the plug a little early.
But it's. I mean, I should say actually, we wrote this. Joe wrote this story last week, and then Live Nation came back with a statement for us. And they're pushing back on this idea. And they said, of all the shows Live Nation has on the books this year, less than 1% have been cancelled. That's not Blue Dot fever. It's a normal touring year.
Yeah,
so they're pushing back on this.
Yeah, I did see that. They're basically saying, look, this is just the cut and thrust. Just because somebody has noticed that some tours have been called off doesn't mean to say that this hasn't happened before, because this has happened before. But I do think, I'm going to rather smugly refer listeners back to the very first show of the year where we were making some predictions for what was going to happen in 2026. And I did mention then, didn't I, about bands overestimating their pulling power. And again, it was very much artists in the same area as Pussycat Dolls, bands reforming. It was those where I think maybe the promoters were getting a bit carried away. At the time, we used the example of the Hives, whose last UK tour included at least a couple of venues that had to be downsized. And obviously they just overestimated how popular they were, or how many tickets they were going to sell. So it's not new exactly, but it's certainly worth keeping an eye on this, I think.
Well, also, I think we might see some more of that. We talked about recently about, was it On Vogue and Salt and Pepper and TLC going out on the road together?
The big package tours.
Maybe we're going to see more of that. Like, for example, what if Jennifer Lopez and the Pussycat Dolls did a tour together? Maybe that could fill those stadiums, those arenas. So I think maybe we might see a few more of those where people are going, right, we've got so-and-so coming back, so-and-so else is on the road. If we match them together, we think we can be much more confident of filling the arenas rather than having to cancel embarrassingly. So, yeah.
Talking of the costs of touring, actually, you may have already seen this, but our friends, the legendary indie band Los Campesinos, have been dishing some data again. You remember that they came clean over how much money, or how little money, the band earned via streaming royalties. But this time, they've broken down how much it costs to tour North America.
Yeah, and this is really interesting. And I think the interesting thing here is this was a successful tour. They played like 11 concerts, and they sold 99.2% of the tickets. So they played to about just under 12,700 people. So obviously it's a scale, it's club gigs about.
Yeah.
But this was a good tour. They filled rooms.
Yeah.
And they did this. I mean, it seems to be the habit of this, just saying, look, no one puts figures out there, so we're going to. Which I think is really good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, we are. By the way, Los Campesinos, we are very grateful to you because it's usually quite hard shoehorning figures like this out of people. But this is, it is fascinating, isn't it? Because it shows you how much they earned and then how much everything cost. Yeah.
So on the top line figures, they got, after taxes and booking fees, they got just under £100,000 for the tour.
Which just to stop you there, you think £100,000 for 11 shows. I mean, that's not bad. And you think that looks like a nice figure. And then you go to the till receipt for all the costs. And all of a sudden, that £100,000 doesn't look so big.
Yeah, and I'll just use some of the highlights. So visas cost them nearly £5,500 before they even got on the plane. The flights cost just over £7,200. Insurance. So basically, the band spent £14,500 before they even got to the US.
Right.
Now, this is my favourite cost, which sounds absurd, but then it makes sense. The tour bus cost just under £46,000 for this country.
Right. So that's hiring one of those sleeper buses.
It's a sleeper bus, yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
They're actually they're not spending on hotels for a lot. They spent, I think, a couple of nights in a hotel, and the bus driver needs a hotel room because he needs a good sleep. But this is somewhere they can sleep. And there's 7 of them in the band. There's a crew. And there's a couple of their kids are along.
Right.
Because you can't just leave the kids at home.
Yeah.
So I think it's 12 people were sleeping on the bus. So that saved them on hotel fees elsewhere. Crew wages was £23,000. That's tour manager, roadie, merch seller. So they got paid. It was £99,738.05.
Right.
And the expenses were £101,827.95. So they were about, what is it, £1.5 down? No, more than that. Yeah, about £2,000 down on the tour. But there is a silver lining because they sold 2,266 t-shirts, which was around £88,600 of sales. So they made nearly as much from selling t-shirts as they did in fees for the tour.
Yeah, that's great. The only part of that which I think would faze me is having to find the money to make all those t-shirts in the first place. Because the upfront cost of manufacturing all that merchandise, I mean, that would make me slightly nervous. Please buy a t-shirt. No, please buy a t-shirt. We've got 14 boxes of t-shirts left, and if we don't sell these, we ain't getting home.
Yeah, £38,408 to be sure. So the end of it they came out of this tour with an overall profit once merch worked in was just over £38,200,
right.
Which between the 7 band members is about £5,500 each. Which and they made the point in the post. They made 2 points in the post that I thought were really important. One was that a lot of this. One of the point was we paid for a lot of this up front, and then we got the money back. Another point was, well, that £5,500 isn't. We're going to be investing that into what we do next in future projects. But they also said, we're not touring to make a massive profit. We're touring because we love touring and we want to go out and play to people.
Yeah.
And we've managed to do it without making a big loss. So it's kind of a positive story in that sense. I think they managed to do this tour. All those fans saw them live and they had a great time. But they didn't make a load of money, even when you look at the big numbers for merchant fees. And it's a fascinating kind of insight, isn't it? And
emphasises as well how multi-talented you have to be. Not only do you have to write songs and be able to perform, you also need to be a tour accountant. You have to be good. You've got to plan these tours. In terms of how much money it's going to cost you. Otherwise, I can imagine a band who haven't done the sums properly could walk away thousands of pounds down. You've really got to keep an eye on where the money is going and how much everything is going to cost, don't you?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is these were full rooms. So I can only imagine the gigs were good atmosphere.
Yeah.
Which I guess next time they go back, maybe they can step up to like the next rung of venues up. And the people who went were like, yeah, I saw them last time. They were great. It was a really good night. We'll go again. So I think that's the other thing is, I guess by doing this well, by planning it well, by not playing to half empty rooms, you are hopefully building that fan base for next time. People bring a friend along. So it's all investment. But I think they said it's a, yeah, if anyone sort of, I think this is what they said in the blog post, isn't it? People often say, oh, you make your money on the road, don't you? You make it from merch. And it's a very good riposte to anyone who thinks that don't worry about streaming royalties because you'll make all your money playing live. This kind of breaks down why it's not quite as rose tinted as that.
Third story of the week, and this is, well, it was a developing story over the past few days, where we hear Sony Music Publishing is buying Recognition Music Group, and I thought I don't recognise Recognition Music Group. Who are they? But it actually is a company that you might remember under another name. But anyway, Sony are buying Recognition for something like $4 billion US dollars, and as part of this, some very famous musicians' rights are going to be changing hands as part of this deal.
They are. So Recognition Music Group is actually a company we talked about a lot in the first days of the podcast. It's a company that owns music rights, mainly publishing, and it's a new name for a group of companies that used to be called Hypnosis.
Oh, it's those companies, them, right?
Which, I mean, if you think about how many stories we did about that.
And none of them, all of them complicated. All of them left me with some sort of headache because they were all different branches of almost the same thing, weren't they?
That's it, yeah. And it's just talk about who was who and who was buying who and who was worth what and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically, this is a group of companies, and a few years ago, Hypnosis ran into financial trouble. It got kind of bought by a company called funds belonging to Blackstone, which is one of the biggest kind of investment companies out there, and they have owned this, and they renamed it Recognition Music Group, and it's been carrying on since then. So it's got around 45,000 songs and recordings, and this is like among the people they've bought stuff off: Red Hot Chili Peppers, Fleetwood Mac, your favourites, 50 Cent, Barry Manilow, Blondie, Leonard Cohen, Justin Bieber and Timberlake, Shakira.
Right.
So a lot of real heritage stuff, and then some new artists too.
Yeah.
And yet now Sony Music Publishing is buying that catalogue. And what's interesting is earlier in the year this was rumoured, or Sony Music might buy Recognition Music Group. And earlier in the year they said it would be more than $2 billion it would pay for it. But this week, both Bloomberg and the Financial Times, who both know their onions, reckon the price is more than $4 billion.
Really?
So
I think at the time, weren't we saying it's hard. We didn't know whether the valuation was a true valuation because, I think there was a suggestion that when Hypnosis were selling themselves off, are they really worth that? And I think you made the point that, well, I think the catalogues that they own will retain value, if not increase in value. So it could be speculative that actually this can only grow. But it felt like a lot of money at the time. But it turns out maybe it was a good investment then if they're selling on so quickly.
Yeah, well, I think the Blackstone funds bought Hypnosis for, I think it's like $1.83 billion or something.
Right.
But at the time, I think its portfolio of rights, the actual songs, were thought to be worth $2.2 billion. So it kind of got them at a bargain. And now they're worth $4 billion. So yeah. And the other thing is, it's quite the week for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Because in a separate deal, Warner Music and its investment partner, Bain Capital, another big investment, they just bought their recordings catalogue for more than $300 million.
Have they?
Yeah,
really?
and the Red Hot Chili Peppers sold their publishing rights to Hypnosis for $140 million in 2021. So the Red Hot Chili Peppers rights, publishing rights, are worth what? I don't know what the publishing is worth nowadays, more, presumably. But, that's a lot of money to spend on socks and whatever else you spend on when you're in the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
We all know what you think of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is something I shall take you up on later in the lock-in, I think, because you should move on. We've got quite a bit of any other business to deal with. Talk us through this. The British charity Youth Music has warned that 37% of grassroots music projects in the UK are in danger of shutting down. and are obviously asking for support. This is when we say grassroots music projects. This is stuff more aimed at young people. It's not just venues around the country. These are, when we say projects, it's community things and it's a lot about learning and people coming together, and opportunities for younger people to get into music.
Exactly this, yeah. So youth groups, music clubs, schemes to help people get into the industry. And it's a kind of a good news story with bad news within it. So the good news is they have this Rescue the Roots campaign, which is trying to fund these projects. And they've raised £1 million so far, which Youth Music has said it's going to match with another £1 million. So this is £2 million to go on these projects. And I think they mentioned a list like Sam Fender supported them, Georgia Smith, Bicep, Bastille. So a lot of artists chipped in. But also Spotify, Apple, and Sony Music and other industry companies also back this campaign. So they're getting support. But the bad news is the reason the Roots need rescuing this campaign. Apparently, I think it's like 37% of these projects have considered closing because they're just financial pressures. And 67% say they can't meet the demand. Like they've got too many young people wanting to take part and they can't help them all. So the kind of gist of this announcement was, well, £2 million is good. We're going to help more of them stay open, help them expand. But it doesn't solve all those problems, and that Youth Music issued this kind of call. And I think it was particularly to people in the music industry, companies in the music industry saying, look, can you back our next phase of this? Because this stuff is important. Like the people who come through these projects will be the future stars that make you a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, back us now.
We have talked about how integral alcohol sales are to keeping small venues open. This is a slight twist on that. There's a new beer, a specific beer that you can buy to support artists on tour. Tell us about this. I know the Music Venue Trust have a range of Fight Back lagers, don't they? Fight Back lager contributes a percentage of all of its sales to the Music Venue Trust. But this is another new one now. Yeah,
and yet another story that leaves us cider drinkers out, which I know fairly cross.
Do you know what? I was going to moan about that, and then I had a look on the Fight Back site, and Fight Back now do cider.
They have a cider.
They do have a cider. So don't worry. Give me a month, and we'll have saved the entire grassroots network.
They'll be swimming in money.
But there's another one coming along.
Yeah, and this is a good thing. So it's a partnership between the Featured Artists Coalition here in the UK, we've had on the show before, and Signature Brew is a brewery, and then an amplifier brand called Orange Amplification. And the beer is called Backstage IPA. I think you can get it online, but the idea is it's been sold in independent music venues, and then profits from every pint will go to the FAC to help with things like its UK artist touring fund. So if you get a pint, I'm going to quote the press release here because I love reading about how people describe alcohol. It's a bold and punchy modern IPA stacked with passion fruit, tangerines, and berries with pine and crisp citrus notes. Which to me sounds like, I don't know, maybe as a side drink I'd like that. They've mentioned enough fruit to make it bring it into my wheelhouse. But buy a pint of that and you're helping balance the tour. And I think there's going to be a promotional campaign in grassroots venues this summer. So if you're somewhere, you may then see this being promoted. And I don't know, will it be competing with the music venue? Like, is there a beer battle here?
No, I don't.
What venues are artists?
Yeah, I think there's plenty enough venues to go around for everybody. But they manufactured the beer. I think they were really. I bumped into David Martin from the FAC last week. Well, at the live, we had a board meeting of the live music trade body, and he was delighted because here's a company who've gone, we've got an idea and we'll make you a beer and we'll give you some money. And I thought it was, it was just, it's not often organisations have people approach them. I think it's, provided some respite from always thinking, where can we get funding from to help artists get out on tour and stuff. But I think there's Signature Brew. I think they do two different sorts of beers, don't they? And there's one which is, as you say, punchier than the other. And I think this one is more like a roadie beer. But it's, well played, Signature Brew. Well done.
Yeah. The press release should have said that, roadie beer. I think the passion fruit, tangerines and berries maybe is the better selling point.
I'll tell you one thing. It's this next story came up once again, which we touched on last week. But can you imagine the response of the board members of the organisation Live, all very much involved in live music, promoters, agents, people who run venues, people who look after artists, managers there. Do you think anyone was had any sympathy for the government for possibly delaying the ban on ticket touts, or at least the ban on the resale of tickets above a certain level? Do you think anyone around that table was laissez-faire? Well, never mind. Well,
they're trying their best.
At least it might happen next year. There have been. So this is the story, as I say, which we covered last week. This is the rumour, which by now, because we're recording this on Tuesday lunchtime, the King's Speech, which will contain all the bills, all the proposals that the government are going to put into the Commons in the next session, that's being announced probably as you listen to this on Wednesday. So we'll definitely know by then whether this is in the list of topics to be debated. But it was announced last year that the government wanted to crack down on the resale of tickets by basically saying, no, you can only resell tickets at essentially face value. And that, should, they were saying, that should help wipe out the practice of exploiting fans by selling tickets at ludicrous prices. Anyway, so it turns out that that piece of potential legislation, we don't think is going to be in the King's Speech, in the list. As I say, tomorrow as we record this, today as you listen to it, and I mean, it's not news which has gone down well, is it?
It hasn't. No, I mean, pretty much every music industry body came out last week. I think you may have talked about some of them last week, but the OMF, Live, UK Music, Fan for Allowance, all basically saying we feel let down. You promised this and you made all these words about it, and then you haven't. Well, it seems like you're not going to do it. And again, these are just reports that it might be delayed for a year. No one knows until tomorrow as we talk, today, or possibly in parts if you're listening to this. And if it's not in the King's Speech, that means it's not happening for another year or so. But the weird thing is, I mean, this is something I never expected. So the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who is currently, and for readers outside the UK, he's kind of battling for his political life this week. Like there's a talk of a challenge to his leadership and all this stuff. But he found the time to write a letter to fans, to music fans, shared exclusively on NME. So Prime Minister Keir Starmer has written to the NME and had it published.
I should have seen this, and I haven't seen this. What was he saying in his open letter to fans via the NME?
Well, he was basically saying, don't give up on us. We're still doing this. And he said, we will crack down on ruthless ticket touts preying on music fans. And he said, we'll make progress on the legislation to protect fans and create a policy that will stand the test of time. This is the first step to stamping touts out for good, which, reading between the lines, I wondered if that meant this is going to take more time than we thought, so it's not going to be in the King's Speech next week. But we are still doing it, and that's why. Which I don't think is going to really go down that well with the industry, like you say, even if they are saying they're committed. I mean, they're saying that they definitely want to do it. They're not retreating from the policy itself.
No.
And it seems to be a combination of other stuff that they want to do instead, maybe.
Yeah, but there's two issues here. One, obviously, is that the bill won't be discussed in Parliament until at least next year, and then then you've got obviously the legislation will have to be rubber stamped, and so it doesn't become law for possibly 2 years. But the other thing is, I think the worry around the industry is that the delay could even lead to some sort of watering down of the proposals, because the arguments will start all over again, won't they? As sites that specialise in reselling tickets at a profit will start lobbying all over again, won't they? Because there's now this gap before we see it discussed in Parliament, and that's all most politely, I will say, that is most unsatisfactory.
Well, also, and I could do the politics bit sometimes, can't I? So, as I said, Keir Starmer is facing a leadership challenge. He may not be the Prime Minister in a couple of months.
Yeah.
If there's a new Prime Minister, who knows what happens then? But equally, it's not entirely impossible. There could be a general election next year if things went badly for the current government. And then everything is thrown up. Bills that haven't been done don't get done. There might be a new government coming in and we don't know what they think about ticketing reform. So there is that idea of a year's delay, but trust us, relies on the government still being in place next year to do that. So I think a lot of people are probably looking at this going, we don't feel very comfortable with this. We don't want this to just be kicked into the long grass based on other things going on. So we'll see.
And finally this week, wait for it, Clankers with Attitude are an entirely AI group. They release, entirely AI-generated music on a record label that is, yes, entirely run by AIs. But if you want to listen to their new album, you have to be an AI too.
Do you think we've reached? This is the kind of this is the climax we've been waiting for.
Yeah, this is the point where the whole podcast just gets absorbed into a black hole.
Yeah, well, the AIs all listen to a different podcast, industry people from AI. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of quite funny. I mean, Clankers with Attitude are quite like a name. They've got an album called Straight Outta Crompton.
Right.
It's a reference to a famous inventor with the surname Crompton. But I see what they've done there, obviously.
Yeah.
And they put this album out on the website. And if you go there and you're not an AI agent, if you're a human, it basically tells you to F off.
Really?
At least until this Friday, 15th of May, when they're going to release it on streaming services. So it's kind of a marketing wheeze.
Right, I see. Right, okay.
But it does highlight, I mean, to me, there's this weird world, and I'm still getting to grips with it, but this world of where the next phase of AI is all about these agents. And it's basically you have a little AI that goes off and does stuff for you. It might book flights for you. It might coordinate your diary. It might do. And there's going to be this world where all these AI agents are talking to each other. So my ticket buying AI agent might talk to Ticketmaster's agent to book me tickets and so on.
Right.
And so there's going to be this world where like AIs are interacting with each other with no humans involved. So I guess why wouldn't they make music for each other and listen to it? You know, it's kind of like a logical conclusion of all this, but I don't know where it leads us.
And does your AI agent, do they have to have 5 weeks off? Do they all go off on holiday, these AI agents?
Yeah, and then you suddenly have to do everything for 5 weeks that they've been doing for you, and you're in trouble.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's weird. This is kind of a marketing wheeze, and we're going to see more of those. But it's I don't know. This idea of a label entirely run by AIs isn't that far fetched. Like we talked about one recently, I think, didn't we?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a proof of concept that's not silly. And in some ways is kind of spooking people in the industry, thinking, will I have a job in 2 years' time?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And on that bombshell, that's it from us for this week, I'm afraid. Yeah. Thank you very much for listening. If you are enjoying the show, please do spread the word. You can support us as well via Patreon by signing up to become a super fan, which also gets you access to our weekly lock-in where you get to stay behind after hours for an extra 15, 20 minutes of bonus material. You can gain access to that, as I say, by becoming a super fan at patreon.com/thepriceofmusic. Alternatively, if you'd like to get in touch with us about anything we discussed today or on recent programs, or you have any questions about how the music industry works, anything behind the scenes or the mechanics of the music business that you'd like explained, we shall do our best for you. Drop us a line with your questions. The Price of Music Podcast at gmail.com. That's the Price of Music Podcast at gmail.com. Until next week, cheerio.
Goodbye.